Hello. In this presentation, I'm going to introduce you all to Curated Chronologies, which is the project that I developed as part of the first Teaching with Primary Sources cohort. What is Curated Chronologies? Well, it is an alternative to the big research paper. Basically, what I do is I throw my students into the archives of American art. I ask them to explore an artist's papers, to take what they find, research it, write about it, and channel all of that work into creating a digital timeline that is image rich, that's text rich, that shares some kind of illuminating view of an artist's life. Now, this is a project that I was really excited to develop. And before kind of getting into the nitty gritty of how it works, I'd like to just share some of the excitement and also the anxiety that I had when I started the Teaching with Primary Sources program, if only just because maybe it might resonate with some of you. Which is to say that I was really excited to develop something that would be an alternative to the kind of traditional research papers that I had done as a student, that I had assigned when I first started teaching, and that just increasingly I was finding wasn't working for my students. Just no matter how long my prompts got, no matter how detailed my rubrics were, no matter how much cajoling, begging, kicking and screaming I did during lecture, I just couldn't convince my students to do the kind of research, the kind of writing that I was hoping to have them cultivate through this kind of a project. And so I was excited for the opportunity to find a way to make primary sources be a resource that would help me kind of achieve those teaching goals. However, I also started the program honestly with a lot of anxiety about, what kind of a thing I would develop, because when I think of innovative research assignments that use archives, I think of classrooms that look like this, which is to say small groups of very advanced, experienced students sitting around a big, beautiful table, looking at physical collections that they have easy access to on campus or nearby. And that just isn't the kind of classroom that I teach in. My classrooms look a lot more like this, just to say I teach larger classes. I teach gen ed classes that have introductory level students who are not familiar with not only art history, but just with research in the humanities. I also teach on a campus, which I'm sure is like where a lot of you are teaching. It's a campus that doesn't have easy access to great physical archival collections or physical art collections. So I started teaching with primary sources basically with a wish list, which was that I wanted my assignment to be something that would use digital archives, not physical ones, something that would be suitable for remote learning, because everything was turning remote and asynchronous at that moment. COVID-19 was just starting to pop off, so that became an important goal. I wanted something that would be usable in a larger classroom setting. I wanted something that would be aimed at introductory level students. And I wanted something that wouldn't feel overwhelming or confusing for my students. I think that especially for less experienced folks in art history, the terms overwhelming and confusing can come up a lot. I'm sure maybe some of you have encountered that too with your students. I also want something that wouldn't feel overwhelming and confusing for me to grade, just to say that I know a lot of kind of alternatives to big research papers culminate in artifacts that are like creative writing or, works of art. And to be honest, I never feel comfortable grading that kind of material. That's just not where my training is. It's not where my comfort zone is. So yeah, I wanted something that would end with a finished product that I, as a kind of old fuddy-duddy art historian, would feel comfortable grading, that I wouldn't feel overwhelmed or confused. So in figuring out the kind of project that would thread that needle, my students were actually enormously helpful. Just to say, in my introduction to African American art class, we were doing a thing where we were looking at Jacob Lawrence's migration series and the online exhibition thing that the Phillips Collection has put together about it. And part of that is this online chronology, that on the one hand, you have cultural and historical events, and then on the other side, Jacob Lawrence's life and art. And it's a really great resource. And I remember my students saying, we love this. This is so cool. Why can't we create something like this in the classroom? And I was like, yeah, let's do that. So that became the idea for Curated Chronologies. But in order to make that idea, suitable for a gen ed class and executable, I needed to meet two pretty big challenges. So the first challenge was how to support inexperienced researchers, And the second was how to construct art history timelines, which is to say how to give my students the tools that would kind of guide them towards constructing the sort of timelines that I wanted them to construct, the sort of timelines that would help them cultivate the sort of research skills that I think are important for them. So in the first challenge, teaching with primary sources was enormously helpful, which is to say through our conversations, through our workshops, I really came to appreciate how meaningful and effective scaffolding can be. So in this case, you can see, and this is kind of the layout of all the scaffolding of curated chronologies, where instead of just having this kind of big finished product and having all that pressure there, I break it down to a series of smaller assignments, low stakes assignments that gently and humanely guide my students to the finish line. And that encourages them to build important skills along the way. So just in case it's useful and helps you all kind of begin to brainstorm on your own end, I just want to share what a couple of these smaller low stakes assignments look like. And by the way, you can look at all of them on the Smithsonian Learning Lab, where this is a kind of collection, Curated Chronologies. So the first assignment that I do is admittedly pretty silly, but it's also really impactful, which is just I tell my students to go on a scavenger hunt in the archives. I give them a list of things to find. And believe it or not, this is a really effective way to get students kind of acclimated to the archive, to demystify it a bit, to make it seem less intimidating, and to just kind of help them develop in a hands-on way, just the ability to navigate this database. And scavenger hunts, yeah, it works brilliantly. It's a lot of fun, easy to put together. And, a variation on that I just did a couple days ago in my Art Since 1900 class was just a treasure hunt. So even less structured. I basically said to my students, hey, here are two artists that we've just been learning about, William H. Johnson, Palmer Hayden. They both have digitized collections in the Archives of American Art. Find a partner, explore one of those collections, and then at the end of class, we're going to share and discuss what you found. And I have to admit, this class, it's been one of those classes that's been kind of tough. It's been difficult to get students to talk, to get students to engage. But this activity was a real turning point for us. And not only did it get them acclimated to the Archives of American Art, but it just got them excited about the stuff that they had just been learning about and excited about art history. And we had great conversations. And I mean, this sounds so cheesy, but they left the classroom really buzzing about, how cool archives are and excited to do, their Curated Chronologies project later in the semester. So that's one example of one of these scaffolded assignments. Another one I want to briefly share with you, because I just found it to be very, very useful and probably easily translatable to other assignments, is something I call pushing your research forward. It's kind of like a variation on contract grading, where I list a bunch of easily achievable tasks that students can do that will, add to their research project, and they score points for how many of these they want to do. It can be something as simple as getting a physical book from the library. They earn a point for that. Or setting up a citation manager. I can't tell you over the years how many times I begged my students to try to use interlibrary loan for their research, and they just never would. Suddenly, I give them a point for that in this activity, and everybody's not only using ILL, but they're also saying to me wow, this is free. I never knew that this existed. Why didn't you tell us about this sooner, Dr. Ronan? It can seem like a very silly thing assigning points for something like this, but it's easy to grade, and man, oh man, is it effective? It's really effective. Well, the last thing I just want to briefly point out, this was something I learned from teaching with primary sources, is how incredibly useful short, low stakes, and regular short writing exercises can be. It gives students the opportunity to do that important metacognitive work of reflecting on their learning and reflecting on their work. But at the same time, it also allows me to keep my finger on the pulse of what's going on in the classroom and what's going on with my students and their research. It gives me a chance to intervene when and step in a meaningful way when, say, a student is beginning to struggle or get frustrated or tune out. I cannot recommend highly enough these pass-fail short writing exercises. They're a cinch to grade. They're require very little from you, but they have a really great positive impact on these kinds of projects. So the second challenge I had was how to give my students the tools that they would need to construct the sort of timelines that I wanted. In other words, what I discovered was that there's a lot of free tools online for creating digital timelines, but they were not the kind of timelines that I would want my students to make. For instance, lots of tools for building these really image-rich timelines that would not have any kind of interpretive writing component to them at all. and lots of tools for creating these kinds of more like business worldy, very text heavy timelines that wouldn't encourage my students to do the kind of close looking, the kind of connecting their writing to specific objects that I was hoping for them to do. So Virginia Tech, we don't have physical archives, but one thing that we do have is got technology. And so I was able to partner with some folks on campus to build the kind of tool that I wanted. So Curated Chronologies is a site, might be down right now, but I encourage you to check it out when it is up. It's a digital tool for creating the kinds of image-rich, text-rich timelines that I wanted, for creating them very easily. It's available to anybody with a google.com account. And highly recommend checking it out. You can also look at examples of student work that they did as part of Curated Chronologies. And as you can see, very similar to the Lawrence timeline that inspired this all, it has two sides to it, so it allows students to kind of, do very interesting bits of comparative work to create these two chronologies that speak to each other. So explore the tool, think about using it, and I'm looking forward to getting to know you all and doing what I can to help you create your own assignments. So thanks for your attention. And that's it for me.